topic of my paper is globalization and its impact on India's political culture. In the Eurocentric framework, capitalist transition is articulated in the framework of the archetypical bourgeois revolution that frontally confronts the objective and subjective structures of pre-capitalist society. However, Antonio Gramsci revised this schema of capitalist transition through the concept of passive revolution. In a passive revolution, there is a top-down instead of bottom-up transformation of pre-capitalist society through a hegemonic bloc comprising the bourgeoisie and the feudal aristocracy. In India too, the bourgeoisie did not undertake a full assault on all pre-capitalist dominant classes. Rather, it incorporated them as subsidiary allies. This meant the construction of a bourgeois landlord alliance opposed to extensive land reforms. Thus, the political logic of passive revolution called for promoting industrialization without agrarian political mobilization. The end result of this strategy was the hastening of commercialization in the countryside and the burgeoning wealth of middle and rich peasants. In the 1960s, the Green Revolution triggered off a phenomena of rapid enrichment among the agricultural elites of western and southern states, creating a large agrarian surplus that was used for the creation of new urban-rural linkages. So this transformed an originally agrarian bourgeoisie into a regional propertied class, making it part of an elite group composed of rural heartlands, metropolitan cities, and non-resident Indian expatriate propertied class. The emergence of regional capitalist groups acted as a powerful impetus for the death of Nehruvian state capitalism. These new bourgeoisies were interested in the elimination of state regulations which protected the traditional oligopoly and wished to collaborate with foreign companies in order to enter the industrial market. There were a number of other dynamics that facilitated the adoption of the globalizing model. Indigenous capitalism was hamstrung by three problems. First, the low productivity of import substitution industrialization owing to the low rate of growth of agriculture within a largely unreformed agrarian structure. Second, inadequate fiscal revenue and taxation capacity owing to the unwillingness of the bourgeois landlord alliance to bear a heavier tax burden. And third, constricted internal demand for domestically produced goods due to the continuance of land concentration, which allowed landlords to siphon a large portion of the agrarian surplus. To overcome these deficiencies, Indian elites resorted to a model of debt-dependent capital accumulation, borrowing money to finance public spending. It is this debt overhang that precipitated the 1991 crisis by engendering sudden capital outflows, and the confidence of the rentiers had to be restored by enacting neoliberal reforms. Under the regime of global capitalism, investment goes to those places where surplus value can be created. In order to maximize surplus value, capitalists lend support to discriminatory ideologies like communalism, casteism, patriarchy, etc. because they devalue a specific section of the proletariat and thus depress the value of labor power. The capacity of capitalists to make labor work hard is dependent on the size of the reserve army of labor, that is, the size of the unemployed masses, the degree of political consciousness attained by workers, and the strength of the workers' movement for welfareist measures. This means that an ideological attack against a set of workers through discriminatory ideologies lays the ground for the lowering of their wages. The functional utility of these archaic ideologies for global capital results in their growing propagation in the political culture of Indian society. This culture normalizes the practice of violence as a way of satisfying possessive desire and of imposing the will of the powerful on the powerless. It is not possible for such a society to reproduce itself without regarding violence against women, against lower caste and the working class as something inevitable, as if it was preordained by a natural hierarchy. Thus, people become morally numb, helping create the mass psychology of fascism. The Marxist theorist Ejaz Ahmed gives the following example to support this point. Quote, burning the properties of Muslims comes easy to those who are used to burning the huts of agricultural workers. And gang rape of a Muslim woman is only one step away from throwing acid on your wife because she did not bring enough dowry. Unquote. As is evident, primitive ideologies have an internal relation with neoliberal globalization. The modern and the traditional coexist in a dynamic of interpenetration that generates new hybrid practices of a distinctively post-colonial modernity. Let me take the example of gender politics. The middle and upper strata of the urban classes use their conspicuous consumerism as a mark of social status, as something that differentiates them from the cultural stagnancy of rustic or rural people. However, their embrace of Western consumerism goes hand in hand with a very traditional opposition to the so-called Western clothes worn by women, articulating a patriarchal discourse which uses the threat of the lecherous male gaze to curtail the sexual autonomy of women and shift the onus of change from the male rapist to the female victim. Here, we can see how neoliberal globalization gives rise to a political cultural regime which selectively absorbs and reconfigures national and international discourses, both traditional and modern, in order to generate a proto-fascist mix that aids the economic objectives of global capital. This hybridity is also manifest in the fascist narrative. For the ideological acolytes of communal fascism in India, modernity in terms of national unification, military, scientific and technological developments, technocratic neutrality, bureaucratic discipline and hierarchy, and market competition merge very easily with belligerent state despotism, cult of authoritarian efficiency, and a social Darwinian framework of divine inequalities. That's why advanced factories, digital infrastructures, robots, and modern city centers can very easily coexist with bonded labor, casteist oppression, patriarchal violence, and communalism. This nightmarish combination is starkly visible in the domain of neoliberal education, wherein market economics and cultural brutality have been married. The commercialization and privatization of learning has meant that the student is not a creative pedagogical actor but a consumer of degrees who is battling with others to enhance his or her job prospects. In this war of all against all, the exam warrior can freely trample upon others to attain victory. What matters is the raw power possessed by the student. This power can have a cultural grammar expressed in majoritarian attitudes that assert the abject inferiority of the other. For example, the socio-economic backwardness of Muslim community can be explained as a result of their so-called cultural characteristics. The competitive individualism of exam warrior spills over into the cultural parochialism of a distinctively defined Hindu community which is waging a war against a Muslim population supposed to be parasitically feeding upon national wealth. The apolitical student who is so fixated on careerism that he or she justifies structural inequalities displays a similarly callous approach when it comes to the majoritarian oppression of a religious minority. Today, the conjuncture in which Indian students find themselves demand that they oppose this combination of free market fundamentalism and religious conservatism to preserve the country's democratic institutions. This oppressive capitalist formation can be overthrown only by a socialist revolution that opposes the capitalist proclivity for hierarchies and pursues an agenda of secularization, workers' democracy, and feminist revolution. Thank you.